the idea is that from the present, you're able to see that wound in the past and heal it. For me, it has been understanding that joy is in the present. When you're worried about the future, you get anxious.
For sure.
When you're thinking about the past, you get nostalgic or, but when you're present, you can be light. You're not carrying any baggage. There's no problem in this moment.
That's right.
And you can experience joy.
All right, guys, thank you again for being here. Really excited to have you on the show. We have Sandra and Oz from the RAway. We're going to talk a lot about the RAway, this new company that you guys formed. But to start, would love to hear how you first met, right? Because that's the genesis and the origin of the company. Right. So we'd love to hear about that.
All right, Sandra.
Yeah, I'm going to tell it because he tells a different story. So you want the truth?
The whole truth, absolutely.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Okay. So, Oz is a client of my aunt, who's a very good psychologist here in Miami. Mm-hmm. And every time I live in El Salvador, so every time that I would come visit, she would let me sit in her session so that I would learn her techniques. And I flew in one day and she said, look, I have 2 clients that are willing to let you sit in. And one of them was Oz. So, I just observed and took notes and learned from what was happening. But I remember feeling this deep admiration for this man who was very vulnerable and wise and mature. Although the timing was not right, it wasn't like that, like I was married. But that's how we met. And then every time I would come back, the 3 of us would have dinner, or we kept reconnecting. We would talk about children's books because we both have children. And we had this we wouldn't talk much, but every time we would meet, it was like, oh, this is...
There was a connection.
Yeah. And then when I finally, years later, I decided to move here to pursue a master's, and I ended up living in the same building that he lives in because it's a beautiful area and it was very convenient for my children. Mm-hmm. And when I had made that decision, I was in my aunt's office again with all of my family, and he came in. Mm. And so it was like electricity, oh, there is Oz. And then the timing was just right that time.
Awesome. Do you remember it the same way?
I remember perfectly coming out of that session, and there was Sandra out with the whole family. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I saw her, I felt this electricity. And I was, wow, what's going on? And I remember her father was asking me questions, and my mind was like, what's going on? I couldn't answer. I felt like, man, this guy must think I have problems or something. Because
so you're already getting questions from the dad, huh? Yeah, right away.
So it was a very magic moment.
That's
what
awesome.
I felt there was undoubtedly something. So after that, we started dating.
Very cool. How long ago was that?
That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And actually, the way we started dating was very beautiful because we started asking each other questions. We started this game like, okay, I'm going to ask a question and we both have to answer it, and then you go, and then I go, and then you go. And the first question was, what is your biggest fear? Like, we started off deep.
Wow.
So we got to know each other like that.
Yeah, at that time, Sandra was still living in El Salvador. So we started talking a lot in the phone and chatting until she came back. But I felt like by the time she came here to Miami, we have talked so much and asked so many deep questions that we really knew each other
we're like question 54 or something like that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's very rare where you start, a relationship with those deep and honest questions. Because usually, you have those first dates, it's all very superficial, right?
Yeah.
It's all very high level. So talking about what your biggest fear was right off the bat.
Yeah, that was number one.
That was number one.
Yeah, that was number one. And it was like, okay, the rule is you have to be honest. You can choose not to answer, but you can't lie.
I like that.
But we answered all of them.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So immediately there was just like this trust and comfort.
Right.
Yes.
To be able to kind of divulge these crazy topics to each other.
Yes.
I like that. So talk a little bit about the RAway and how that evolved and came about.
Yeah.
So by the time I met Sandra and she talked about her aunt, I'm so blessed to have found her, because I found her at a time in my life that I was in a very dark place. I was going through a lot of things in my life. And she's not only a psychological therapist. She creates like this beautiful spiritual container. And it was the first time that I actually start, outloading or let. It was the first time that I allowed myself to start feeling, and she created that container, and I started working a lot of stuff that I have put on the shelf in my life. So that was the beginning of my personal work. And by the time I connected with Sandra, I have done, a lot of retreats, being part of many peer-to-peer growing organizations, and done a lot of stuff. And then I found out that she was also in that path. She was working a lot of her issues. So we had this magical container immediately after we met, as she was saying, with those questions. And for the first time, I felt, that I was seen in a relationship. And we start having all these deep conversations about life purpose, and then very organically, this idea of doing something together to give back, to help others growth, and this energy that we call co-elevation, that is when two or more people support each other in a growing process of unconditional love and not judgment. So that's how we started to talk about this idea. And then we started getting a lot of validation from the universe and signals and synchronicities, the way the name came up, the support of the people around us. So we started creating this whole idea about let's create this ecosystem. Let's assume all of our experiences, all of our tools, and let's create this ecosystem to support other people grow, so they can have, what we have been blessed to have and gone through in our growing process.
I love that. Sandra, anything to add on the RAway and origin?
Yeah. So like Oz said, it was a very organic process. I don't think that we came up with it. I think that it found us. Even the name, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah, tell me about the name.
So like we said, we embrace this like radical truth and vulnerability and getting naked, So this word raw means that, organic, no additives, no filters. And it means the real authentic way. So it's like this lifestyle or this commitment to walk through that path, which we understand that leads to self-fulfillment versus, and this is something else that we received for this name, the opposite. If you move raw upside down, it says war, right?
So, never noticed that.
Yeah.
Never noticed that.
It came to us like that.
Wow.
So it was like, you can either walk in this path where you're connected to your authentic qualities, or you can walk in this path of war where you're in conflict with yourself and others, which leads to drama in your life. And then after that, I was in a dinner and somebody mentioned Ra, which is in Egyptian ancient times, he was considered the king of the gods, the god of the sun. And we have this fascination for the sun.
Here's a Ra right here, right?
That's Ra right there. And we also we love birds. One time a snake found us. So all of these symbols, and it was like, wow, our brand, the RAway, which is spelled, the RAway, we have been talking about this God all this time. It's like he has, or they have, kind of fed it to us. Please, pursue this in life and we will support you.
Because the way you spelled the name is right, capital R, capital A,
yes.
and then way, right?
Way.
So there's kind of like a tribute there.
That's his name.
Yeah, but I think it's also fascinating, the story of what happened in your retreat for Fit Service.
Because I was in this retreat and they had asked us, please bring something because we're going to create an altar together. Bring something and then we'll give it back to you. And I was in his house the night before and I had forgotten about it. And I read it in the chat and I was like, oh God, can I borrow something from your house to take? And he was like, sure, take whatever you want. And he even suggested, do you want this? And I was like, no. And I grabbed this symbol. It's called an ankh, which is very important to us because it's a symbol of life and it represents the journey back to yourself, which is what we've been talking about. This process of, in order to discover your purpose, you kind of have to get lost and do the opposite to realize that this is your passion and it's really important. So that symbol is very important. So I grabbed it and I was like, okay, I'll bring it back. And then as I heard in my first night in this retreat, when somebody mentioned raw, they weren't even talking to me. It was just like a conversation. I was like, what did you say? You know, I Googled him and I find this image of this being who had the ankh in his hand.
Oh, really? Wow.
And everybody was like, what's happening to you? Because I was like,
You had a moment
wow.
there. Yeah.
And I was like, when you see what I bring to the altar, you're going to understand what's happening to me. So my friends there said like, wow, the universe is screaming at you. Like, you are in the right path. This is what you should be doing. And I was so excited to share, like, guess what? Our brand is also, you know, not only the real authentic way, but it's also the raw way. You know, this.
Amazing.
And now
God of the Sun.
And now RAw is all over my meditations.
All over. Yeah.
Amazing.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Amazing. You talked about people finding their true authentic selves and authentic qualities. Like that seems like a lot to unpack, right? How does one go about that journey, right? Because I think that's what we all want, right? We all want to feel aligned with our authentic self and discover that part of us. Like, we're all going through life sometimes a little bit lost. And sometimes we're led down a journey that we didn't decide, right?
The way of war.
Exactly. So how does one go about that process?
Well, I can share my own experience.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You know, in my case, I was born and raised in Venezuela, and I was on a very conservative family. My dad was like a very important person at that time in Venezuela, a very public person. And I remember since being a child that I felt I was not seen. I always was the son of Oswaldo. So I started to develop all these survival patterns of protection for myself. But in a way, those patterns that I developed disconnected from my essence. And it took me a while to start realizing that I was in victim mode. You know, I was not even, you know, after I was 18, 20, graduated from law school, and I was on these patterns, but I was blaming everybody else, but taking responsibility. But at some point, I think the life and the magical life throws you all these alerts and red flags that, you know, something you're doing is you're disconnected, you're not following your purpose, you're leaving someone else a script. And I was doing everything, you know, very successfully in terms of what people expected from me.
Right.
I went to a top university, I did my MBA in a top university, and I was all following all these script to get this validation, but I was not happy. So what happened 6 weeks after I got to my MBA in a very prestigious university, I had my first and hopefully last panic attack, you know, and that was like the biggest wake call of my life.
How old were you?
At that time, I was 26.
26.
And I remember it was a terrifying experience, and just going to the mental health department of the university and going through all that process. It was a huge ego deflator, but it was also the first step to start connecting with myself. And that's when I started this process and never stop afterwards. And then all this, I think when you put the intention and you said, you know, there's certain aspects of my life that I'm tired. I want to connect with my true essence and live my fullest potential. A lot of resources, synchronicity, mentors, things start to happen. And that's what started to happen in my own process. So I think I started to raise my awareness. And then I had another huge important thing that happened in my life, which was the death of my best friend and partner in many businesses. And I think the biggest blessing that I had about that relationship is that for the first time I learned you can have unconditional love towards a friend, you know. And then I said, you know, if I can have this unconditional love with a friend, I want to recreate that. I want to recreate that in community with other people, help other people grow from a place of non-judgment, like recreate that magic space that I had with him. So that's when we also started doing, you know, creating this community and creating these experiences, because it was a great way to connect and allow people to start, you know, working their own stuff in a safe place. So I think in my process is you get these red alerts, you get tired of that operating system of leaving somebody else's script, and you realize, wow, if I assume the responsibility, I can become the director of this script instead of an actor that is depending on somebody else's script. Right?
Got it. Sandra, thoughts on that with finding your authentic self? And
yeah.
I think in Oz's case, right, the panic attack, that was like that's your internal alarm, right?
Yep.
Sounding off that something's wrong.
Yeah.
I think we all, panic attack, that sometimes that elevates into something very, very intense, but we have sometimes the little alarms that just keep, knocking at us saying something's not right, something's not right.
Yeah, to me, I think it was to discover who I am, I had to live who I was not, and then realize that was not me.
Right.
So like I say, the journey back to yourself.
Right.
So as an adolescent, I was in an eating disorder for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
And there was a lot of self-loathing and self-destruction and a huge disconnection from my body, And so I had to go through that process to then go through the process of healing and unlearning all of that and learning who I was, with curiosity and like Oz mentioned, non-judgment, unconditional self-love, radical acceptance. And so those are the things that we have brought in this system, like it's so important to know that, through radical acceptance and forgiveness and unconditional self-love, you can heal anything. So, yeah, that was, we both went through our processes, and I bet that everybody goes through their processes of, getting a little bit lost to find yourself. And there's so much wisdom in that process because there's a reason why that was what happened to me. That's what happened to him. And how that is a guide to your mission and what you can offer other people.
I was reading a book, Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way, right? Kind of has a similar kind of ethos, right? That you kind of have to go down the wrong path to really find what the right one is.
Exactly.
So that's very interesting. And I think, again, self-love, that's that's kind of, a topic that, and a word that gets thrown around a lot, self-love. But, I think that's probably one of the most important things that one person can figure out is how to really accept themselves for who they are and not judge themselves, because a lot of people, that's the I guess foundation of problems with mental health is you don't like who you are, or you're feeling bad about who you are based on, like what you said, society wants you to be someone else that you're not, and you're trying to conform to that.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what else? Feeling, there's all of this resistance to feeling. We have been taught that, don't be upset, don't cry,
right,
be happy, right? And then there is so much self-love in allowing yourself to feel exactly what you're feeling.
Yep.
And understanding that it's impermanent, it's going to move, it's going to bring you a message. And if you sit with it, you're loving yourself.
Yeah.
And then, wow, you receive this message of this is what I should do about that. Or I'm very passionate about that because there's information here for me. And so what does self-love look like, right? It's not just that bathe at night with a candle. It's go through the mud.
Absolutely. That's fascinating stuff to me. So I want to talk also about what the RAway and the company and the program entails, right? You were telling me a little bit, there's multiple pillars, right, that are involved. Can we go through those? And
yeah, absolutely. Basically what we did is we want to create this ecosystem of experiences that has helped us grow, right? So the sum of our experiences, the many retreats we have done, the organizations that we have been part of, what have worked for me and for Sandra. And for me, the most important things are, having mentors and coaches, doing retreats. That's how everything started for me, with a retreat. I was in a very bad place. Also, I found a book from Deepak Chopra that I took from my mom's library many years before. I read the book and then I booked a retreat. And that's, I tried before to meditate, but I couldn't do it in my own. I went to this retreat.
Was the retreat through an organization or like?
It was the Chopra Center.
It was through Deepak Chopra.
So Deepak Chopra, the Chopra Center in California. So I went there and we started meditating 3 times a day, 400 people. And the energy that I felt is like, wow, I want more of this. And I started, going deeper into my meditation practice. And since that day, I never stopped meditating because that changed my life. So that curiosity of, finding new experiences, new tools, it opened up even more. And then being part of peer-to-peer groups, I think there is a great power of being part of forums or masterminds where people can really get naked. And if you create a safe space and the right tools, there's a lot of magic that happen. Not only learning from each other, but actually healing from each other. I have seen the amount of healing that can happen when you put a group of men, a group of women, or a mixed group, that you create this safe space for vulnerability. And how can we see each other, and how can we heal each other just by reflecting back and having the right protocols to do so. So our idea is to create these 3 pillars, and around them all this experience, so people have access to these resources and this content for their own personal growth. One of the things when you were talking about self-love that I learned from my friendship with my best friend who passed away, once we had that relationship, we were talking every day, and it was this co-elevation, really energy, not judgment. I just want to see you, accomplish your potential, and let's do it. What can I do for you? And that type of mindset. I remember when he died, I said, well, how can I replicate this? How can I replicate this energy? And this realization came to me, well, the first thing is that you have to become your best friend, not your worst enemy. And then if you become your best friend, you're able to give that energy back and be the best friend of others, creating that space that you can challenge, but you don't have to fix, right? So that's what we're doing. We're trying to create this, we are creating this ecosystem for personal growth. And I think after a retreat that I did in Costa Rica, the second intention stuck with me, which was merge with your soul at all costs. So I have that, I'm living that, and I will do whatever it takes to feel that I'm, confronting my dark side, confronting my toxic patterns, and getting close to my full potential.
Amazing. So you were saying that this retreat down in Costa Rica, that really shifted things for you. Again, just to clarify, that wasn't the Deepak retreat, right?
No, my first retreat was at the Chopra Center, and then I did many retreats.
Right.
The Costa Rica retreat was at Rhythmia, and it's a plant-based medicine retreat, specifically ayahuasca.
So involving ayahuasca. I'm fascinated by the topic of plant-based medicines and things like that. So could we talk a little bit about your first experience with ayahuasca, and what led you to be like, discovery of this, and I want to give it a try?
I had this friend that I admire deeply, super smart guy that knows all the details of plant medicine and all that. So he was telling me for some time about it, and he was talking about ayahuasca, and I can't even say the word, but then one of those things happened that you start hearing the word more and more. People that you care start talking more and more about it.
I feel like just saying it is therapeutic. Ayahuasca. I feel better after saying it.
I even said he would say ayahuasca, and I was like, until you can say it right, you can't do it.
That's it.
Yeah.
I like that.
So one day I was having lunch with this friend that I admire deeply, and he says, "Man, I'm going to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca," and for some reason it totally resonated. Right?
Just clicked.
Yeah, just click. And then I started doing some research at Tim Ferriss, hearing all his interviews about it. And I remember hearing Tim Ferriss says, if you're going to do this, take it seriously. It's like a brain surgery. Make sure you find the right container.
You need the right person to lead it, right?
The right person to lead it. So we did, I validated the idea of doing it in Rhythmia. And I went with Sandra, and it was an amazing experience. In Rhythmia, they have 3 big intentions. For everybody. The first one is to show me the person that I have become. You ask the medicine, show me who I have become. The second one is merge me with my soul. And the third one is heal me with my heart. Heal my heart. And you kind of leave those 3 intentions. So it was a beautiful experience. What I got from it was amazing. I have done a lot of integration and work afterwards. We did this over a year and a half ago. I don't have any plans in the short term to do it again. I think that gave me a lot of information, and also it helped me with my meditations. I can connect now deeper and longer than before. So there's something special about having done that experiences. But like everything, I think you have to keep doing your behaviors and keep integrating. As there's a saying says, be careful with unearned wisdom. So there is a work that you always need to be doing. And I remember when I signed up, I had this doubt of whether to do it. It was right, wrong. Right. And I saw this documentary where there was Deepak Chopra saying, if you're in the spiritual path and these cross your path and it resonates, to it. And that's exactly what happened for me.
Amazing, amazing. I'd love to hear your take on ayahuasca and your experience with it.
Yeah, I was close to it for a long time, and then it's like Oz says, it just finds you. It calls you. It calls you. And so from not talking about it, all of a sudden we were hearing it everywhere. People, like you were having dinner and somebody would say ayahuasca, like, okay. So I started researching, and I'm very, having studied psychology, I wanted like evidence, research-based evidence. So I started researching about it, and I discovered that, all of these very intelligent, very well-educated people were giving all of this evidence that this was a very healing plant. For example, Timothy Leary, who was a Harvard professor, he said, I learned more about the human mind in one night than I did in 15 years.
Wow.
So that for me was like, okay, now I'm very curious. Like I want to do this and see what he's talking about. And that was my experience. I've done therapy for a long time, and I was never able to get to the wounds and the memories that I was able to observe when I did ayahuasca.
Wow.
Because you tend to, when something is too painful, you kind of hide it deep down and
bury it under the rug.
Throw it under the rug, hide it. So ayahuasca gives you access to those files that have been thrown under the rug, and it's a very intense experience. You see them in your face, but whatever you are seeing, you're healing. So you kind of have to, go through the mud and navigate with these memories, but you come out healed. So to me, it's like, it's a very intense experience. And, if it calls you, do it. If it doesn't, don't. But it's like a luxury to be able to take a plant, something that nature provides, and to have access to these memories, access to, you're able to see how all of nature connects. There's a lot of beauty in what you're able to see, as well as, what you're able to see that you have thrown under the rug.
Yeah, well, I was just watching a Joe Rogan podcast the other day. He had somebody on, I forget the name of the guest, I'll look it up, and he talked about his ayahuasca journey, and when he went down and he did it. He was a writer, and he had substance abuse issues. He was doing something every single day that became very, very abusive, and because he was a productive writer and was still able to live his life with the substance abuse, he just always swept it under the rug and said, you know what, I'm in control of my life, even though there were damaging relationships around him, but still was able to kind of rationalize things because he was being productive. It was a trip down, I believe it was to Costa Rica, to do ayahuasca that literally, after he ingested the plant, everything was revealed to him about how many people he's hurting around him, even though it's not necessarily, shouting at you that you have an issue or something like that. Like ayahuasca really was the thing that awakened him and made him stop. It wasn't any other intervention but that plant that actually brought it to his attention. And that's what I hear about ayahuasca. I forget, this guy's name, but he described it as a way of, you have these cards inside of you, like a playing deck. And when he takes it basically shuffles out all the cards, and like expels out of your body, and he sees all the cards of his soul and his mind and his body out in front of him, like clear, like here is you, this is you, and this is the things you need to fix. Can you relate to that? Is that
absolutely? I can totally relate to that. I think for me, that experience, what gave me is exactly what you're saying. But also you receive all these insights and these realizations about, your own operating system. Like I remember one night that by the second day, we had a very rough night, the second night. And I was telling Sandrita in the morning, I'm done. I'm not doing, because in Rhythmia they do ayahuasca Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and
so
Thursday
it's a multi-day thing.
Correct. Four nights.
Wow. This is not, just to be clear to our listeners and viewers, this is not like an enjoyable process, right? This is not like a vacation. You're going to drink some drugs. No, this is a
very
thing.
hard work.
Yes. It's not recreational or anything
This
like
is
that.
very hard work.
Yeah.
And it's it requires a lot of courage to go through this experience, because you don't know what you're gonna face, right? Sometimes a lot of people have memories that I don't even remember that pop up.
Yeah.
But that explains certain patterns that you went through because of that.
You don't know what's behind the door,
You
right?
don't know
until you open it.
Yeah. So it's an intense process, but also you get all these insights. Like I remember The third night, I was like, Sandra, I'm done. I cannot take it anymore. This is too intense. But then they do it in a very good way. You have you go and the shaman that is going to lead that night ceremony explains it. So there was a woman the third night, and she says, listen, tonight is the feminine energy. A lot of you want to quit. Don't quit. Go tonight. So that night was one of the most beautiful nights of my life. And the message that I received was really the realization of how important it is to be present. I was with Sandra. It's like the time stopped. We were so enjoying the present moment, the two of us having conversations. So you receive a lot of information and insights to improve your operating systems, aside also for the healing that you know you need to do.
One of the biggest gifts that I received there was, because you don't feel that great, right, when it's kicking in. So I learned to be with myself, and I would repeat, I'm here, you're okay, I got you. Like me telling myself that. And then a month later, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and I was by myself in my balcony, going through these emotions. And I heard myself saying, you're okay, I got you. I'm here for you, cry it out. So I was like, wow, that stuck with me. Like that lesson of, I have my own back. Yeah. I can navigate through anything, and whatever I'm feeling, I'm releasing. I was telling my mom that the other day, like, wow. That prepared me.
Yeah, well, that like you were talking about radical self-love and acceptance and being your own best friend.
Exactly.
That's a great example
Having
of that.
your own back, supporting yourself.
Yep.
So yeah, it's beautiful what you get, and the timing of everything is perfect.
I love that. And you were talking about being present, right? That's like one of the key things you walked away from that experience. And I think there's probably not a more important thing to master in this world than presence.
Absolutely.
And especially these days where we have 100 screens everywhere. We have these supercomputers in our pocket, literally with these push notifications. I call them pull notifications because they're designed to pull you away from whatever you're doing by companies that are, $1 million valuations and $1 billion valuations. That's their whole intention. Yeah. Take his attention. Right. Take his attention. So talk about presence. I mean, it's something that I need to work on. I think everybody, listening can relate to it and just trying to be more present in the moment, right? We all strive for that. Is this something that you incorporate into the RAway and something that people can learn?
Absolutely. I think it's part of your growing process, right? Part of the problem that we have sometimes is that we are in the past or in the future, right?
Yes.
I remember myself, I was always in that victim mode, and I couldn't even allow myself to have fun or joy. I had to always be worried about something, So it's when you start doing your work, right? In my experience, the first thing that you need to conquer is your internal peace. And to be at peace with yourself, you have to make peace with your past, right? And once you do that work, you conquer that peace, then you can start working your joy, and then you can connect with abundance, but not abundance in a material way, much more bigger than that. Like one of the things that I enjoy now is having these meaningful, transcendental relationships, that actually nurture you, that nurtures your fulfillment. So I think that's kind of the process of the way I see it. You have to do some work with your past, not become obsessed with your past, but do some work of the things you need to work that keep you going to the past with those wounds. So once you work that and you are able to be and enjoy the present, then your joy vibration starts going up, and then the connection with the abundance.
I love that.
Yeah, Sandra? It's very relative because I like to believe that the future has already begun. So this concept of presence has so many layers, right? And in the RAway, one of the tools that we use is your ability to understand that we get triggered in the present, in our relationships. Your wife says something and you you start feeling this trigger, and you have a reactive pattern that is subconscious, and you kind of always stick to the same pattern. So in the RAway, we help you identify what your pattern is. And so once you identify your pattern, you are able to not react in that way, because the reason you have a pattern is to hide that wound that you have from your childhood or your adolescence. So the idea is that from the present, you're able to see that wound in the past and heal it by practicing again
Right.
radical acceptance,
Yes.
unconditional self-love, forgiveness. And, in order to love who you are now and who you will be, you need to love all the ones that you've been. And that's what happens with a wound, that, something happens, you're a child, you're not able to feel. It's overwhelming when
Right.
something super intense happens. So you kind of disconnect from
Yep.
that moment, you throw it under the rug, and then you're going through life disconnected from your inner child. That's the whole inner child work thing, is like reconnecting back to that, the adult or the one in the present, loving, holding, seeing, hearing, validating that child, and in so creating the future that you want to create. And again, with presence, for me, it has been understanding that joy is in the present. And this is something that a lot of people talk about, but when you're worried about the future, you get anxious.
For sure.
When you're thinking about the past, you get nostalgic, or, but when you're present, you can be light. You're not carrying any baggage. There's no problem in this moment.
That's right.
And you can experience joy
I love
in
that.
now here land.
I love that. Absolutely.
There's no problem in now here land.
I think it makes so much sense. And I try to constantly remind myself of that. There's really no point in, reminiscing about the past, especially we try to focus on the past of things that bother us, right? And things that we wish we could have changed.
Yeah.
Does nothing for us except cause more anxiety and things like that. And
Feel embarrassed.
For sure.
Feel afraid.
For sure. I mean, we have an example, right? Just 20, 30 minutes ago, right? We had my dog Ace that relieved himself on the...
Probably felt very shameful about that.
I did. I felt very embarrassed, but at the same time, I know you guys are awesome, right? And we all practice self-acceptance, right? So I accept myself in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Couldn't have done it.
Embrace the present.
Exactly. The inner child stuff, right? The thing about childhood, and this is something I wanted to get your advice on and your perspective on, because as a parent, I'm very mindful and concerned, I guess, for lack of a better word, that I'm doing the right thing for my kids so that later in life they don't have that, what's the inner child that I had with any parental issues, or maybe my dad didn't pay attention to me in this moment, or I had issues with my mom in this moment. I'm trying to maybe, not so effectively think ahead and to say, what if I look back on the past as a parent, what do I wish I would have done, and what do I wish I would have not done, so that hopefully later in life my children don't have any of these issues and baggages. Is that the right way of thinking, or am I thinking completely backwards? Like, we talk about the inner child, like who's our inner child, right? And that's, I think, something that defines a lot of how we behave, our reactive patterns, and how we feel when somebody says something to us based on the way that we were, interacted with as a child by our mother and father. Any advice as far as that goes regarding parenting in that?
It's beautiful that you have the awareness, and that's like you have half of the way done, because you have that awareness. I believe that your ability to work on yourself and work on your childhood wounds without judgment, because we all have childhood wounds.
Sure.
We all wanted more attention than we got. Look at your children. You love them. You spend time with them, you play with them all day, and then at night they're like, play with me more.
Absolutely.
Like, wait, but I just play with you all day.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like a never enough thing. When you're a child, you want more and more.
Right.
And so at some point, you can either have too much daddy or too little daddy, and both of those will create something that will...
Right. So even if you're overcompensating with love and attention,
create a wound,
that's
right?
still something, right? You can't really... There's no perfect scenario here.
Yeah, and it's your kid's process
Right.
to come back to him or herself. And there's no way to prevent their suffering, although with the awareness that you have, if you work on yourself and the patterns that you observe that you have from your upbringing, that will reflect in your parenting 100%.
For sure.
So it's great to identify your patterns. Every time that she says that I feel like this, wait, and I do this, why is that? Like, what's the wound behind that? And let me go, so what, I didn't feel seen as a child, so let me go and work with my child. And then I'm going to understand that my son or my daughter needs to be seen in this moment. And I'm going to give that. So it's your work, it's our
Definitely.
work.
Definitely.
And it reflects You know, we heal our parents and we heal the generation under us. It's beautiful how that can happen.
It's so true. It's so true. And again, these kids are born and they don't come with instruction manuals, right? And you got to figure out how to be.
They're your master.
Yeah, they really are. Absolutely.
But, you know, I realized that the best thing I can do for my kids is to live an authentic life, right? And the more I'm my authentic self, the better example I'm for
sure.
Because it's the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So, like Sandrita was saying, if you're not totally present or you're too much present, they're gonna create a story. But if they see you working and operating connected to your authentic self, and with this operating system that life is happening for you, like good or bad, anything that happen is happening for you to increase your awareness, and you equip them or show them that there are some tools to deal with this stuff. That's your personal growth process. So that shift in perception that life is happening for you, and there's going to be bad days, and there's going to be days that you don't want to get up, and all that is going to keep happening. But if you have the right tools and you have the right perception and you have self-compassion and self-love, you're going to overcome that, and you're going to grow, and the script of your life is going to keep improving. So it's not going to be, everything's not going to be beautiful, but you start enjoying the process and living life from that place of joy of, you know, these things are happening for a reason, and it's for my personal growth, and have something that Sandra and I love to, and she reminds me a lot when I have bad days and says, you know, go back to that radical trust, that radical trust that everything is happening for you. You're open your heart. You're trying to operate from there. There are bad days, but it's happening for you. There's something we need to learn. There is information there, and just keep going. So I think that shift in perception can change your whole life.
I think that's incredibly profound. And that hits me hard. It definitely resonates, and I think it's an important lesson for all of us. And like you mentioned, it goes all back to being your authentic self, right? Being raw and authentic, and that really aligning with, you know, who you are as a person. Because I find myself, the times that I am frustrated, the times that I am reactive, the times that I lash out to people, are the times where I'm probably not aligned authentically with what I want to do in life, right? I'm frustrated with maybe where I'm at in a specific job or my career or in a relationship. That's usually the trigger that things aren't aligned, right? So it's about finding that alignment.
But when you have that awareness and you see, you know, what happened here, and you are able to look back and say, you know, I went to a reactive pattern. It was all about being right or you know, being... and you start putting light into that, you can change those patterns. And that's what happened in my life. I start becoming less and less reactive and more proactive. And once in a while, you know, you're getting one of those patterns, but you are aware. Now you know it bothers you more, so you want to fix it faster, right? So you go to work faster. So we have these tools that you do these visualizations about changing these patterns. And I think that's, you know, everything for me is about having the awareness. It's much easier to fix your room with the light on than with no lights, right? So it's
a great analogy.
Yeah. So the more awareness you have, the whole process becomes much easier, right? So if you are aware, but you're open-minded and you have that curiosity to keep growing, to keep learning, to keep getting these tools with curiosity, right? And not with dogmas and being close-minded and I have to be right. But you just learn. I can have conversations now with anybody, you know, in religious, politics, and I don't go to those conversations anymore. I used to be right, to try to convince you or something. I'm going to learn. I'm going to see what's your perspective. I'm going to see if there's something new for me to apply in my life. And hopefully I will tell you from my experience things that might help you. And that's the whole perspective that I take now with these conversations about life and transcendence, you know.
Yeah. Radical trust and radical truth. The beauty of being with your kids and saying, I'm sorry, I was reactive there, but that happens. And you can do that too when that happens. You know, it's you're teaching them
absolutely
the non-judgment, the beauty of imperfection.
That's right.
You know, we learn from our mistakes. And I think that's the most beautiful legacy you can leave them. You know, we're all imperfect. We're all in school learning. I'm not better than you. You know,
I'm your parent, but I don't have all the answers.
Exactly.
Right?
You have all the answers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Within yourself, you got to find that.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's a nice quote from Ram Dass. He says, "We're walking each other's home."
Yeah.
Right. So if we have that consciousness, right, that we're going back home, and this is like a school time, right, to connect to our authentic self and get closer to our potential, and we start helping each other more to accomplish our potential instead of all these unconscious triggering and reactive patterns, we create a total difference, whether it's in our personal ecosystem, in society, in our families. I have seen when that shifts happen, how the whole ecosystem changed.
We talked a lot about parenting and the inner child and all that stuff, and I think that's a great segue into your book, Sandra. Tell us about your book. First of all, what inspired you to write a children's book?
I have always loved children's books.
Okay.
I collect them, and I love reading bedtime stories to my kids. And I have this problem. Like, every time I see a new book, I have to buy it,
Good problem to have.
Yeah. Read this bedtime story.
There are worse vices than that.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. Like, adults should read children's books. They're so simple. You read one a night, they have so much wisdom, and it's illustrated, joyful. So this really came from my wounds, my desire so that my daughter does not have to go through the same negative experiences that I went through. And I wrote her a letter one day. And when I read the letter, I understood that this is something that I wanted to share with all moms, all parents. And I decided to turn it into a book so that I could share it. And basically, I understand that the best legacy we can leave our kids is to teach them self-love, and to have them always know that no matter what, all the changes they go through, their process of self-discovery, whatever they discover, whatever they want to do, whoever they want to be, we will love them unconditionally. So that's how this came about. There's a little bit in there about not disconnecting from yourself. Like a little bit of my experience, I was bullied, and I saw that I went through that process. So I talk about that. I talk about pleasure. And I talk about, as you discover yourself and as your body changes, accept that and love that, and let joy be your guide, So it's kind of like this little poem that's illustrated that talks about dense subjects in a very light way.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. We ordered it. We just got it in.
Thanks so much.
Oh, happy to do it. It's a great book. My wife is very much looking forward to reading it with my daughter. The story in general, how long did it take you to write it? What was the process? You said it started off as a poem.
It started off as a letter. Yeah. I have Liz Gilbert to thank for that.
Okay.
Because I read her book, Big Magic, and and I have Costa Rica to thank for that too.
Yeah,
because that was one of the intentions that I set for myself. I saw that I really love writing, but I would always get inspired to write when I was sad. And I wanted to be able to write from joy. So I set that intention in the retreat. And it was so interesting that as I was flying back to Miami, I started writing. And it wasn't that book. It was something else. You have to be curious as to, if I feel like doing this, I'll do it. And then see where it takes me.
Yeah, you can't force yourself to write on something.
You can't. And I realized that creativity it brings me joy, and it makes my life funner. So I committed in my last birthday to lead a creative life. So in order to do that, I set aside one day a week to just be creative. Whatever that meant. Go to a museum, right. Read all day, go to the beach. And in one of those, it was a summer that my children went with their father. So I had a little bit more time, and it just, in that summer I wrote that letter. I designed the book. I had somebody illustrate it.
Amazing.
So it was kind of like a summer project, and now I'm very into it.
Very cool.
I want to write many more.
And I love that idea about just taking one day to be creative.
Yes.
Right? Just kind of free your mind and see where that leads you.
Yes.
That's awesome. So you say you're looking forward to writing more. You do have another book.
I'm writing one for my son, because this one is for my daughter, for all girls in the planet. And then I'm working on one for all boys in the planet.
Awesome. And can you give us a little preview what some of the themes will be in that book?
Well, yeah, I honor, divine masculine, like you men here that are not afraid to be vulnerable understand how much guidance is in what we feel, and the strength in, or the courage that it takes to express what you're feeling, cry, lead from your heart, not from your mind, So I want to talk about all of this and leave it for my son, talk about the how feelings can guide you. So allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to be vulnerable, and the magic that happens when you're vulnerable, leading from the heart, and the definition of strength. And also how I'm your mother, but I believe that Mother Nature is always going to contain you and hold you and give you everything you need. And it's beautiful because eventually I'm going to go home,
Right.
But Mother Nature is always going to hold you. So
it's a great message.
Working on that.
It's a great message. And I love children's books like this that have that deeper message in place. And I feel like, again, I read the book, and this is one of those books where you read it more and more times, different things can jump out at you,
Right.
The second and the third read and things like that. So that's awesome. Oz, would like to shift a little bit to you and talk about your background and you as a coach, right?
Yeah.
How you became a coach and that whole journey. And then also want to talk about masterminds and some of the stuff that you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as soon as I finished my MBA, I made this promise to myself that I was not going to work for anybody, right? So I started my entrepreneurial journey. I didn't came from a family of business, quite to the contrary. I had this operating system and beliefs that if I made too much money, I was going to be suspicious in the eyes of my dad, and all these toxic, beliefs that I had in my mind. So I had to work hard. I went to the business world and started my entrepreneurial career, and started, I went through a lot of industries. And my last business, I went with my best friend, and it was a commercial airline that we started from zero and grow very fast. But I remember, even the company was growing fast and all this was happening, I was not happy. There was something there that I was not happy. Everybody was seeing from outside like, wow,
big success.
Big success. Yeah. You're running an airline, 300 employees, millions of dollars in revenue. But I felt empty somehow, and then my best friend got sick, and then he passed out of cancer. So I said, you know what, I'm going to take a year to sell the company and see what I'm going to do next. And in that process, I hired a personal coach, which is a mutual friend of us, Adam, and he helped me in that transition. And I said, you know what, for many years in my life, I've been trapped in different businesses that I didn't necessarily have the passion or I want to, but for some reason I got into it, right? So I said, now I'm going to take the time to really try to connect with my purpose and live a life of meaning. So working with him, this idea about becoming a coach started growing on me. So I started to explore it. I went to a couple of conferences about it. And then I started to embrace it. And then I certified myself as a business coach. And then I said, you know what, but if I'm going to do this, I'm going to embrace my personal growth as well. So if I'm going to help CEOs, I'm going to help them not only to do all the, to bring all the tools to align the company and have priorities and KPIs and all the strategic execution system, but what about him personally? How can I improve his ecosystem? How can I make sure he has a more fulfilled life? How can I make sure he actually starts leading from the heart?
360 view.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Because it's my own journey, like that constant fight between emotions and intellect, right? That war, that struggle.
Yep.
And you as an entrepreneur also know everything that we go through, right? Man. Our fears, our everything that it takes to be an entrepreneur, and that roller coaster, right?
Yep.
And sometimes we operate from the wrong reasons, certain things, right? So it's about giving the entrepreneurs and the CEOs conscious choices. If you're going to make a decision, if you're going to operate a business, that you're doing it for the right reasons, right? So because, we have many examples. I have many friends. They build multi-million businesses, and they're not happy.
And miserable. Some
They're-
of the richest people I know are some of the most miserable people I know.
Yeah.
Correct,
Right.
which is very sad,
It is.
because you kind of. I heard the other day Tony Robbins saying, the ultimate failure is to have success and not be happy.
Yeah.
Right? So you make all this business, you have all this money, and you are totally miserable, right?
Goes back to not finding your true authentic self, right? You
Correct.
made money, but you never were true for who you are.
Correct. So one of the things that Sandra and I are living again is that merge with your soul at all costs and help others do so. So I think that's what we're doing and we're trying to do. And me as a coach working with entrepreneur is about that. I want to again replicate that energy that I had with my best friend of co-elevation and see, I really want to see you in your authentic self. I want to see you leading from the heart and creating that ecosystem in that company to make sure people are raising their own awareness and improving their operating system. And I have a lot of passion around that because I have seen the effect. Sometimes one conversation changed somebody's life.
100%. Like this one right here.
So grateful.
And when I did the other day a strategic session on a company that I knew the CEO, and I remember I came like an hour before and I meditated on the parking lot and said, I have two options here. I can come in there like a normal business coach and, do the work, or I can really be vulnerable and go deep about my own experience, my operating system, and try to make a difference. Maybe some of that will resonate with some of them. And that was one of the most beautiful days of my life. I remember driving back home crying because I saw the change on people of increasing awareness and saying, you know what? And it was so interesting because one of the persons in the leadership team during the break told me, can we have a conversation with the CEO? And the three of us sit down and he apologized to the CEO and says, I want to apologize because I have been behaving on this pattern. And this has to do with a wound with my dad. And I just realized this today. So I'm sorry. I want to make my best to make sure, I solve that issue and I have a better relationship with you. So it's about the people, right? It's not only about accomplishing goals and metrics and all. It's about making sure in that ecosystem that you operate in, there is peace, there is joy, and obviously people are doing their job and are following on their rocks and their priorities and doing what they are supposed to do. But if they are not, or if there's something not working, let's address it from the personal side. This is human beings trying to consciously or unconsciously are trying to find the same peace and the same joy. So I was very fortunate to work with this CEO. I admire him deeply. He was totally open for me to going in and challenging them, challenging him as a CEO also because he is a very controlling CEO. But when you operate from an open heart, right, and somebody that has good intention is challenge you, again, there's a lot of magic that happens there.
Sure.
Because at some point I told him in the middle of the meeting, I think it's time for you to sit down and listen from a good place. And he was like, he thanked me so much because he says, Oz, I realized at that moment that if I want this company to go to the level that I know is going to go, I have to let go. So it's just beautiful. So I'm very passionate about helping entrepreneurs and having myself going through that journey. Very good days, very bad days. There were some nights that I didn't know if I had a business the next day. And that roller coaster that I know you
Absolutely.
You went.
It's a tough life, the life of
through.
an entrepreneur,
And if
as you guys know, yeah.
And if you don't have this ecosystem of support, it's a very lonely journey, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I think most entrepreneurs, they default into a deep sense of loneliness because, when you're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you're a founder, you're building your own company, you're supposed to be, or you're expected to be the guy with all the answers, right? Especially once you have employees and investors, everybody's looking to you, and you don't want to let anybody down. And typically, you have to put this face on every single day. You're concerned that you only have a few payrolls left in the bank, and you're running out of money, but you can't show that to your employees, or they'll get concerned. They'll look for other places to work and things like that. Investors start to lose confidence in you as the chief operator of the company. So I think by default, a lot of entrepreneurs, they're on autopilot into a mask.
Correct.
And they don't realize it. And if that extends for long periods of time, which it usually does, because any company that you start, especially a venture-backed company, is on average 5 to 7 years until some kind of liquidity event. So you're seeing these entrepreneurs and these founders and these operators live with a mask for 5 to 7 years, and they don't realize it until they come out of it. That was the big thing for me, is that when I sold my company, I looked back on it and I was like, what a blur. Like,
Wow.
I did the best I could, thankfully we got it sold, and, it was somewhat of an okay ending, but for a long time, it was very, very difficult because I wasn't myself for those periods of time. I had to play a role, and many roles, to many different people when I was running that company. So, I admire what you guys are doing, with the RAway. I think that could, for a lot of entrepreneurs, can, use the program that you guys are providing to live a more authentic life.
Yeah, and I see you have here Ray Dalio's book.
Sure.
And as you were talking, I was thinking about how great to have, a billionaire like him write this book.
Yeah.
Where he talks about meditation.
Sure.
He boasts about creating this environment where the best idea wins. But, it sounds amazing. The best idea wins.
Meritocracy,
but in order to create that environment, the leadership team, the CEO, the
100%.
entrepreneur has to be in such a place of awareness and self-confidence and have all these in order for that to happen. So that's why I think in my case, it was not enough to do the business coaching per se. For me, it's key to make sure I'm helping that CEO increase his awareness, because I know that will make a difference in his life, in the life of many people around him.
Agree. That's very meaningful work. I agree 100%. So let's circle back to the RAway and how people can access this coaching and this program, right? Like what's the best way to get started and contact you guys, and how are you rolling it out?
There's basically 4 ways that we can be of service. Okay. So the first one is coaching one-on-one, which is what we were talking about, creating this space where we can provide a mirror for the person we're talking to so they can see themselves, see their wounds, work through their wounds, and as they work with themselves, they can create a better ecosystem at home with their families, at work, The second one is these mastermind groups. Like, as we were saying, it's a kind of like a lonely journey, and it's beautiful to find a supportive group with like-minded people who are on the same journey, and provide, this container facilitated by us where they can talk about all these things, be their own medicine. It's interesting how one person has the answer for the other, or how just being in a space where you can freely talk and get naked is basically all you need. You talk and you answer your own question.
Absolutely.
So that's beautiful. And it's kind of growing from that, being with just one person and being in a group and having, that energy of co-elevation. Your process is going to help my process, and vice versa. So that would be the second pillar. And then the third pillar is increasing that even more. So we do retreats because we understand the importance of community, healing in community, supporting each other, finding that support, and living through joyful experiences that are very different from your day-to-day. You kind of make a pause where you get to reset, where you get to, as we were mentioning, identify what patterns you're operating from, what you wish to shed, what you wish to take on, and come back challenged, renovated, clear, so that you can be happier, which is basically, we want to keep it light. Like, our destiny is joy.
Yes.
So let's work towards that so we can be there.
Yep.
And then finally, we like providing content that, if you don't want to be a part of either of these 3, we can serve you in that way, where we post videos or thoughts or things like that can maybe synchronistically serve you in any moment in your life where you're needing that.
Yeah, blog
support.
Posts, recordings, things like that.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Amazing. Talk about your first retreat, right? That's happening. You guys got something in the works?
Yeah, we're doing a retreat in Costa Rica, and it's intended for CEOs and entrepreneurs, and it's around all the ideas that we have talked on the podcast. A very good friend of mine who is a coach now and is a former CEO of a public company, amazing guy. he reached out to me because he knew what I was doing and said, why don't we put a retreat together, Sandra, you and I, and that's what we did. It's going to be an amazing experience in a beautiful place in Imiloa in Costa Rica. And the whole idea is to talk, business, but also about all this stuff and go through some experiences. Like I remember the first time I did breath work, right? If you're open and you're curious, just the thought that in a breath work you can access your subconscious and work some of this stuff is just mind-blowing, right? So the idea is to create some of these experiences that open your curiosity even more, that led to a change in your life and in your operating system. So we have planned a lot of fun stuff and a lot of hard work stuff too, because it's about connecting with yourself and looking inside and then making that harmony among your body, your mind, and your intellect, and surrender to spirit, and start asking those soul questions. Who are we really? What do we really want? What are we grateful for? What is the purpose in life? And trying to connect with that. And my own experience is when you start asking these deep questions and you are doing the work, answers will come. And I can bet you they're very different of the ones you're probably living. And it's fascinating. I'm so grateful of being able to put this experience out there, which is a reflection of all our personal work and things that we know will make a difference. So we're excited and looking forward to it.
Amazing. And
yeah,
go ahead.
Super grateful. I think that this is one of those opportunities in life where we're being called to give it all we've got. Use all your tools, share all your tools. The place is spectacular. It's in the middle of like the heart of nature in Costa Rica. They call it like bare feet luxury because it's super beautiful. There's like glamping and this rich tropical rainforest, right? So there's like a lot of high energy there just by being there. All of the food is plant-based, and that Imiloa Institute is very conscious place, and so I think that it's the perfect container for the magic and the healing that we're trying to bring and provide these new challenging and nurturing experiences at the beginning of the year so that you can set the tone for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's good timing, right?
Yeah.
If people want to sign up and get more information, where can they go?
So the best place to go is to the Imiloa Institute webpage,
okay,
and they can find the retreat there and register through the webpage of the retreat center.
Yeah. Also through our Instagram accounts,
which I'll post on the video. Yeah.
We can provide videos of the place and you can see a little bit also of like our process, our tools, and all of that.
Very cool. And how can people contact you guys directly?
So the best way, I think, is the Instagram.
Okay, great.
Through Instagram, that's where we're more active, and,
nice.
and we can definitely respond to any question or follow up.
Just send you guys a DM.
Yes.
Right? Okay, good.
We love to interact.
Okay, awesome. So I'll post your information in the description and on the screen. If you want to get in touch with Sandra and Oz to learn more about the RAway or go on the retreat and learn more about the program, you guys can contact them directly. Thanks so much, guys, for being on the show. This was a great conversation.
Thank you, Will.
much.
I'm so grateful, that I met you. I appreciate you. I admire you. I think you're doing a beautiful work, not only with the podcast, but with the entrepreneurs. So I'm really grateful for the invitation and to share this conversation.
Likewise, the gratitude goes both ways, guys. Really, you can tell when you meet somebody that the vibrations are similar and that the mindset's similar. Oftentimes I can judge how a podcast went just by how uplifted I feel after the conversation, and like right now, like I'm ready to do anything, right? So, thank you guys for being here and for spending some time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.